The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM Software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users, on demand on iTunes and on YouTube, and on my blog, GaryBaumgarten.com, where you are encouraged to post your comments, whether you agree with me or not. Several of you do agree with me on today's topic. Several of you do not so far on the blog, and that's perfectly okay. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we're syndicated across the United States into 12 million additional households. I am your host, Gary Baumgarten. Welcome to the show. We were going to talk about tasers today because of the increasing cases of people who have been tasered by the cops and then have died from this non-lethal, safe way of subduing suspects. And we may get into a discussion of that before the day is over. If not, we'll return to it in one of our subsequent news talks online on Paltalk.com. But as you all know, this morning at 9 o'clock New York time, Washington time, the President of the United States announced that by executive order, he was going to make available to two of the big three domestic automakers, General Motors and Chrysler, $13 billion in federal loans. That'll likely go to $17 billion in February when they come back for more money. Something that surely he discussed with Barack Obama before he did it. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we rushed through the bailout of Wall Street that I was very dubious about, and then the Congress dragged its feet on the issue of bailing out the big three, which was something I'm actually in favor of. Why the dichotomy, you ask? Why the inconsistency? Could it just be because you are a born and raised Detroiter, Gary? No, not exactly. I think it's because of my close association with the auto industry, covering the auto industry when I was in Detroit, that I recognize that if General Motors and Chrysler fall, so too will Ford Motor Company, so too will Nissan in the United States, so too will Toyota, because the suppliers for GM and Chrysler are also the suppliers of all of the above. And if the suppliers can no longer make enough of a margin in sales to stay in business, well, then everybody falters, everybody fails. And by the way, the ripple effect on the economy would be absolutely devastating. You think things are bad now? You cannot imagine how bad they will be unless you already live in Detroit, southeastern Michigan, and you see that it is not a recession there. It is a full-fledged depression. A depression while the auto companies are still in business, albeit struggling. And that would just expand across the rest of the country. And, of course, you might as well put up the vacancy sign and turn out the lights in Detroit if that were to happen. So I actually, with this move, with the president that I have been extremely critical of over other issues, find myself on the same side as President Bush. Interestingly, many of the people of his own party, members of his own party, are opposed to this loan. And by the way, we do call it a bailout because it does bail them out, but it's designed to be a bridge loan for General Motors, a bridge loan for Chrysler. Ford Motor Company is a couple $2 billion in the black and doesn't need the money, at least not at this particular time. But, you know, the last time they bailed out Chrysler, not only was the money returned, but it was returned with dividends. Turned out to be a good investment for the American people. And, you know, economists both on the left and on the right tell us that in order to spur this economy, there has to be spending. Prudent spending, as the previous President Bush might say, but spending nevertheless. So that's where I fall on all of this. And by the way, I just want to point out a couple other things before I turn it over to you to challenge me on all of this. You know, the foreign auto companies that the U.S. domestic auto industry competes with, they are already subsidized one way or another. Did you know that the Japanese automakers, their R&D, research and development, is funded by the Japanese government? No, you didn't know that? Well, it is true. Did you know that in other countries, you already know this, where they develop cars, where they manufacture cars, they have national health care. So the auto industries do not have to bear the burden of the cost of health care that have been contracted by contracted with the unions and also with their salaried employees. So that burden is shifted to the general population. Now, I'm not advocating that national health care is necessarily a panacea for the United States, but I am saying that for the auto industry, it would reduce the cost of the manufacture of the vehicles if they did not have to assume the cost of health care, not only, by the way, for the union employees, not only, by the way, for the salaried employees, but for the retirees as well. It adds thousands of dollars to the sticker price of every vehicle that Detroit makes. Okay, with that out of the way, with me feeling good about having said what I have to say about the auto industry and why I think there ought to be a loan given, let's turn to those of you who may agree with me or who may want to challenge me. Let's start with Scott in Canada. Scott, welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Thank you, Gary. One of the interesting things about this bailout is it is tied to bailing out Wall Street again, because they were predicting that they would have major shockwaves in the bond markets if the automakers went down. And also the extreme amount of debt that's actually being held by GM would, further the actual